Your life is in bankruptcy and you did it to yourself. You are not lazy. That's the first thing you need to understand before this gets worse. You are not lazy, you are not weak, you are not broken in the way you think you're broken. But you are bankrupt. Financially, the word means you owe more than you can pay. Neurologically, right now, today, that is your exact situation. You have been spending currency you don't have, on things that cost more than they appear to, and the bill is due, and the bill looks like this. You wake up and the first emotion is nothing. Not bad. Not good. Nothing. You lie there and the ceiling is just a ceiling and the day ahead is just a sequence of obligations that you will move through with the specific mechanical quality of someone who is present in body and somewhere else entirely in every other sense. You know this feeling. You have known it for a while now. And here is the part that should concern you more than the feeling itself. You did this. Not a corporation, not an algorithm, not your childhood. You made a series of decisions, each one individually reasonable, each one individually harmless, each one feeling like the opposite of harm, and the cumulative effect of those decisions is a nervous system that has been so thoroughly saturated with cheap stimulation that it has begun the process of repricing everything else in your life downward until the things that are supposed to matter register as approximately nothing. This is dopamine debt, and you are deep in it. Here is the mechanism, because you need to understand the mechanism before the protocol makes sense, and because understanding how something works is the first step toward not being controlled by it. Dopamine is not the pleasure chemical. That is the popular simplification, and it is wrong in a specific way that matters here. Dopamine is the anticipation chemical. It is the neurological signal that fires when your brain predicts a reward is coming, and its primary function is motivation. It is the thing that makes you get up, pursue, work, wait, endure. Without dopamine you do not feel pleasure. But more critically, without dopamine you do not feel the desire to do anything at all. The wanting comes before the getting, and dopamine is the wanting. Your brain does not generate dopamine in unlimited supply. It generates it in response to the ratio of effort to reward. When you work on something difficult for 3 weeks and it succeeds, your dopamine system fires at a level proportional to the effort and the delay and the uncertainty. The signal is large. The motivation it produces for the next difficult thing is correspondingly large. This is how high-functioning people sustain high-functioning lives, not because they are differently constructed neurologically, but because they have learned, intentionally or through circumstance, to invest their dopamine rather than spend it. Now consider what happens when you spend 45 minutes on short-form video content. Your phone delivers a stimulus approximately every 6 to 8 seconds. New face, new sound, new conflict, new joke, new body, new outrage. Each transition fires a small dopamine signal, not large, not sustained, but continuous. The brain receives hundreds of small reward signals in 45 minutes. It is, from a neurological standpoint, equivalent to visiting a casino that never stops paying out tiny amounts. The experience feels passive. It does not feel like consumption. It does not feel like spending. It is spending. And the currency it is spending is the same currency your brain needs to feel motivated tomorrow morning, to sustain attention on something difficult for longer than 90 seconds, to feel genuine desire toward a goal that will take months to realize. Every small dopamine hit from passive consumption is a withdrawal from the account that funds your ability to want things that are worth wanting. You have been making withdrawals for years. The account is in the red. The ceiling in the morning is what a depleted dopamine system feels like from the inside. There is a population of people for whom this is not their experience. Not because they are genetically superior or born into different circumstances, though some of them were, but because they have, at some point, understood the mechanism and restructured their relationship to stimulation accordingly. Watch what they do not do. They do not spend the first 45 minutes of their day consuming other people's content. Not because they have superhuman discipline, but because they have understood, experientially or intellectually, that the first hours of waking are when the dopamine system is most vulnerable to being priced downward. The baseline from sleep is the highest it will be all day. What you expose it to in the first hour sets the reference point against which everything else that day will be measured. Flood it with TikTok and your own life. Your actual work, your actual relationships, your actual goals, will register as gray by comparison. Not because your life is objectively gray. Because you have reset the comparison point. They do hard things first. Not as a motivational concept, as a neurological strategy. Doing something difficult before your brain has had access to easy stimulation means the reward signal from completing it is experienced against a low baseline. The dopamine hit is proportionally larger. The motivation it generates for the next hard thing is proportionally larger. This is the compounding return on invested dopamine. Over months, over years, it produces a person who genuinely wants to work on hard things, who experiences boredom as an invitation rather than a crisis, who does not need external stimulation to feel alive. They protect their dopamine system the way someone who understands compound interest protects their investment portfolio. They are not ascetics. They consume entertainment, they enjoy pleasure, they do not live in hair shirts. But they are selective about the ratio. They understand that the ease of access to cheap stimulation is not a feature of modern life. It is a design decision made by companies whose revenue depends on the continuous consumption of your attention, and that those companies have invested billions of dollars in making the consumption feel like rest when it is actually expenditure. The other 99% have not made this distinction. You have not made this distinction. And the cost of not making it is not abstract. You want to talk about the real costs because this is where most conversations about dopamine stay comfortable, and this one is not going to do that. Your relationship. If you are in one, think about the last time you felt genuine desire toward your partner. Not the performance of desire, not the mechanical response to physical proximity, but the actual wanting that makes intimacy something other than a scheduled obligation. If that feeling is distant or absent, there are several possible explanations. One of them, not the only one, but a significant and underacknowledged one, is that you have been outsourcing your desire circuitry to pornography and your reward circuitry to your phone, and the person in front of you is competing for neurological attention with content that was specifically engineered to win that competition. Pornography is not a moral issue here. It is a neurological one. The sexual stimulation available on demand through any device delivers a dopamine response calibrated to novelty, new face, new scenario, new stimulus on demand, that the human nervous system did not evolve to handle. Regular use does not make you a bad person. It does, demonstrably, recalibrate the threshold at which your brain recognizes sexual reward. Your partner, who is one person with one face and one body and the inevitable familiarity of sustained proximity, cannot compete with infinite novelty. This is not a reflection on your partner. It is a description of what happens when you train your reward system on a stimulus that no real relationship can replicate. The coldness you feel is not indifference. It is debt. Your work. You sit down to do something that requires sustained attention, and within 4 minutes you are somewhere else. Not because you lack focus as a personality trait, because you have trained your attention system to expect a new stimulus every 6 to 8 seconds, and 4 minutes is approximately 40 intervals beyond the threshold. The work is not the problem. Your recalibrated baseline is the problem. Work that would have felt engaging 2 years ago now registers as insufferable because the comparison point has shifted. The career stagnation that follows is not mysterious. It is predictable. The people who advance in any field are the people who can sustain attention on difficult problems for long enough to develop genuine competence. You cannot sustain that attention. Not because you are not intelligent enough, but because you have spent the neurological resource that attention runs on. Your ability to experience joy. This is the one that people find most disturbing when they see it clearly. The activities that used to produce genuine pleasure, the meal with people you love, the film that absorbed you, the book you couldn't put down, the physical experience that made you feel alive, have been quietly repriced. They still happen. You still do them. But the signal they produce is smaller than it was, because the baseline against which your brain measures them has been elevated by years of cheap stimulation, and against that elevated baseline, real life is a discount experience. This is called anhedonia when clinicians measure it in clinical contexts. In your daily life, it looks like a vague sense that everything is slightly less than it should be. That the food is fine but not great. That the relationship is okay but not exciting. That the work is tolerable but not meaningful. That you are getting by but not living. You are not depressed in the clinical sense. You are dopamine bankrupt. The distinction matters because the treatment is different. What follows is not a philosophy. It is a protocol. It has a biological basis and it works in the direction of the mechanism, not against it. You will not enjoy the first 72 hours. That is correct and expected, and the discomfort is information, not evidence that you should stop. The first thing you do is remove the delivery mechanism from the first and last hours of your day. Not from your life permanently, from the first hour after waking and the last hour before sleeping. These are the two periods of highest neurological vulnerability. The first hour because the baseline is cleanest and most easily corrupted. The last hour because the stimulation interferes with the sleep processes that are responsible for resetting the dopamine system overnight. You will experience the removal of the phone from these windows as a specific discomfort that feels like boredom and is actually your nervous system noticing the absence of a stimulus it has become dependent on. Sit with it. It diminishes within 3 days. The second thing you do is schedule difficulty before pleasure every single day without exception. This is not motivational advice. This is a neurological investment strategy. Hard thing first, whatever the hard thing is for you, whatever requires sustained attention and produces resistance, before any consumption of entertainment. The sequencing matters more than the duration. 30 minutes of genuine difficulty before any passive consumption reprices your reward system in the correct direction. The entertainment that follows will feel more rewarding, not less, because it is arriving against a low baseline rather than an elevated one. The third thing you do is introduce deliberate periods of stimulus absence. Not meditation necessarily, though that works. Deliberate boredom. Walks without audio. Meals without screens. Commutes without content. The specific discomfort of having nothing to consume is the sensation of your dopamine system beginning to recalibrate downward toward the baseline at which real life registers as rewarding again. This process takes weeks. The first week it feels like withdrawal, because it is withdrawal. The second week it feels like dullness. The third week you begin to notice that a conversation with another person is interesting in a way it hasn't been for a while, that a problem at work produces a flicker of engagement rather than dread, that the meal you are eating actually tastes like something. The fourth thing you do is audit your consumption by asking one question about everything you consume. Does this raise or lower my baseline? Content that you consume passively while your attention is elsewhere, that requires nothing from you and produces only the stimulation of novelty, that lowers the baseline. Content that requires active engagement, that teaches you something that changes how you operate, that you would choose to revisit, that is a different category. The distinction is not between highbrow and lowbrow. It is between consumption that demands your attention and consumption that simply occupies it. The fifth thing, and this one requires the most honesty, is addressing the pornography variable if it is a variable in your life. Not from a moral position. From a mechanical one. If you are experiencing the relationship coldness or the desire deficit described earlier, and pornography is a regular part of your week, the correlation is not coincidental and the solution is a period of abstinence long enough for the recalibration to occur. 30 days is the commonly cited threshold based on the available neurological research. The experience of this period will be uncomfortable in specific ways that confirm the dependency. The experience after this period, in terms of how you relate to the person in your life, will be different enough to be instructive. The sixth thing is the one people resist most because it requires confronting how much of their social consumption is stimulation rather than connection. The hours spent watching other people live their lives, through social media, through long-form parasocial content, through the continuous monitoring of feeds, is not social connection. It is social stimulation. It produces a dopamine response that substitutes for the neurological reward of actual human interaction without delivering any of the relational substance. The substitution is invisible until you remove it and notice the sudden awareness that you are lonely in a way the phone was covering for. The loneliness is real. The phone was not addressing it. It was anesthetizing it while it grew. None of this is a weekend project. The debt accumulation happened over years. The recalibration takes months. But the direction of change is visible within weeks, and the compounding effect of the recalibration, harder things become more accessible, real life becomes more rewarding, the people and projects you care about register with more signal, follows the same mathematical logic as the debt accumulation, only in reverse. You are at a decision point right now, and the decision is not dramatic. It is not a commitment to a new identity or a wholesale reconstruction of your life. It is a smaller, harder decision, whether to apply what you now understand about the mechanism to your actual daily behavior, starting today, or to continue the pattern that produced the morning ceiling and the relationship coldness and the work dread and the quiet sense that you are getting by but not living. The people who are living the life you would choose, genuinely engaged with their work, genuinely present in their relationships, genuinely capable of sustained effort toward something that matters, are not running on different neurological hardware. They are managing the same system differently. The management is a practice, and the practice is available to you, and the only thing preventing its implementation is the pull of the very mechanism you now understand well enough to name. That pull is real. It is designed by professionals whose full-time occupation is making it as strong as possible. Understanding the design does not make you immune to it. What it does is make the choice visible. The choice was always there. You just couldn't see it clearly through the constant stimulation that was specifically designed to prevent you from seeing it clearly. You can see it now. The account is in the red. The question is whether you start making deposits today. Not tomorrow. Not after this video. After this video, there will be another video. And another. And the algorithm that governs what comes next has been trained on billions of data points about what keeps people watching, and what keeps people watching is the same mechanism that put you in debt in the first place. So, now, the phone goes face down. The hard thing comes first. The debt starts being paid. Or it doesn't. Both outcomes are available to you. Only one of them is compounding in your favor.